Pollution does not follow political boundary. We are seeing what is classically called protest, a protest on the streets for clean air. Yes, in the past, there have been rallies, people going out to demand for clean air, but this is like really a protest.
WHO has done some research. India right now is the most polluted country in the world.
All coal power plants in Delhi have been shut.
We are upscaling medicines day by day, but there will be a point when the medicines also stop working. That will be the worst time.
Majority of the source of the pollution is local, comes from Delhi itself.
Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, they have a fascinating number crunching that they do. Especially during winter, you get to know by the hour where the pollution is coming from. In that, you will see some fraction that comes from outside Delhi. But that's not only farm fires. That's like your surrounding NCR, other districts.
How many air quality monitoring stations do you need in a landmass or a country?
Central Pollution Control Board has a population-based criteria that per certain thousand population, you need one monitor. Delhi has very high number of real-time monitors. Other cities have 10, 3, 2, 1 kind of, but no other city in this country has 40. Every year when we talk about pollution, it is Delhi that hogs the limelight. It is just not Delhi. It is the entire Indo-Gangetic plain.
Welcome to Planet People Profit. I'm your host Sudipto Dey. This is that time of the year when bad air, pollution and its impact on the public health starts hogging the headlines. Most of us staying in the National Capital Region are familiar with this. It may last for a couple of months maybe. But this year something is different. There have been protests on the street where citizens have asked for their right to live in a clean air environment. In this episode, we unpack the issues around Delhi's bad air crisis and the emerging health emergency with the help of two leading experts. Anumita Roychowdhury has been a pioneer in the Right to Clean Air campaign. She has over the years helped many policymakers and governments to come out with clean air action plans for cities in India and Africa. Our other guest is Dr. Nikhil, who has been a vocal campaigner amplifying how Delhi's deteriorating air quality is becoming a major public health concern. Welcome to the show, Anumita.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
Dr. Modi, thanks for taking off time and the fact that you could be here, it's great for us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to be here right now.
You know, I grew up in Delhi and of course, all of us are familiar with the current air situation. Somehow, you know, I've never seen in Delhi people protesting on the streets, asking for clean air. Please, I could be corrected, you know, but I could not recall. I was thinking about when I grew up here, I never could imagine people asking on the streets, telling the powers that be that they want clean air. Is this something new that you are seeing, or is it something, is it a new sort of awareness that's coming up in the citizen that clean air is important? Anumita, would you like to start with you?
So certainly what is new about this is that this time we are seeing what is classically called protest, a protest on the streets for clean air. Yes, in the past, there have been rallies, like cycle rallies or people going out to demand for clean air, organizing events in the public spaces. But this is like really a protest in a very typical sense of the protest. So that's something very new. But this also shows that how awareness is growing, and especially someone like me who's been working on air pollution since the late 90s. And I remember when we had started working on air pollution, no one was even talking about it. It was so easy to dismiss air pollution then, as the politicians would do then, saying that is all dust from Rajasthan, right? And we had to do all that with no data, no monitoring happening in the city. And all that we could do for awareness was to get these pictures of lungs, the black lungs from the doctors, and show that to provoke response. So from there, we have certainly come a long way when people are taking to the street to demand their right for clean air.
Dr. Modi, is this something that resonates with you also?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is just that the awareness is getting better now. Now people are becoming more aware of the problem. And since the level has constantly risen, the pollution level has constantly risen, so the problems is being faced by a larger group of people. Previously, they used to dismiss that this is a one-off instance, one in maybe 100 is getting problem. But now, I would say more than 90% are getting the problem. They are facing the brunt of this pollution. That's why the awareness has come up. They are suffering now, and that's why they are coming onto the streets more.
Anumita, as you mentioned that, you have been working on this space for the last more than 2 decades, I would say. Uh, could you help us bust some of the myths around air pollution? What has happened is that there are a lot of myths around air pollution. As you mentioned earlier also that, the politicians would say it's, the Hawa from Rajasthan, or nowadays we keep hearing about the stubble burning, which is an issue. Could you help us, bust some of the myths around the cause and effect of this bad air crisis?
It is so easy to spawn the myths around the problem and also the solution, simply because it's not very clear to people how air pollution acts on our health. So because there's no one-to-one causation that they can see, right? So as a result, it is very difficult, and often, therefore, you will see, especially the leaders and the political class, on a denial. To dismiss that, no, how can air pollution cause deaths? Okay, because no doctor is going to write air pollution as a cause of death, but it triggers symptoms that lead to deaths. Okay, the second part of it is that understanding the nature of the problem, because often it is dismissed, as I said, considering dust to be the bigger problem. And that's the reason why every winter you see we are just sprinkling water and cleaning the roads, without understanding the toxic nature of the particles and the gases coming from wide, diverse sources of combustion sources, your vehicles, power plants, industries, waste burning, and so forth. The third problem is about the invisibility of the problem, as I said, because when you see the black smoke, or when during winter you see the smog thickening, then it's visible to our eyes, right? But otherwise, during summer, when pollution levels are actually, they continue to remain high. But because we can't see, or with technology improvement, maybe the dense black smoke may have disappeared, but the tinier particles, which are even more dangerous, but you cannot see them with your eyes, right? You don't see them. So you understand, okay, maybe my vehicle is clean. So why are you blaming me? And the final problem is that pollution problem is also very episodic. Okay, like for instance, on Diwali night when the crackers burst, during this 1 month of winter when the farm fire happens, right? So the entire blame then centers around those temporary episodic events, without realizing we need round-the-year action to address the perennial sources of air pollution.
Interesting. Dr. Modi, I was going through some data, WHO data. We talked about that globally 7 million people suffer premature deaths annually due to air pollution. And India is regarded as a hotspot in that. But we don't, in public discourse, this does not come up, frankly speaking, and I don't even know the data for India in terms of air pollution related deaths. It's not classified, I think, as air pollution related death.
Yeah.
So could you just help us understand this whole?
So coming on to the data, WHO has done some research, but clear-cut data to be extrapolated to India is difficult. Okay. But I would say India right now is the most polluted country in the world. It has been found out already. Okay. And it's true that we talk about pollution only in months of October and November, but it is throughout the year we see that air quality index is never in a acceptable range. And when we talk about air quality index, we talk about particulate matter 2.5 as the main culprit, because 2.5 means it is 2.5 microns. It's so small, not visible to our eyes, and it can go deep in our lungs. No filters in our body can protect that from going in. And from there, it can even go into the blood vessels. So the problem doesn't restrict to the lungs. We talk about COPD, we talk about lung cancer, but when these particulate matter go into the blood, it can cause blockage of your blood vessels. So heart attacks are also increased due to that. Risk of stroke, the brain thing, also increases with that. So it is a factor which leads to many other diseases.
Okay.
And then it causes mortality, deaths. And to extrapolate that, you cannot label a single factor, because heart attack, there is a risk of stress, there is a risk of hypertension, there is a risk of diabetes. So this problem adds on to that. So if you say, if risk of heart attack because of your genetic factors is 10%, you can say when you are exposed to this pollution, it increases to 40%.
Okay.
So that's how things are. And when WHO does a research, they find out how much percentage increase due to the exposure to the pollution. And that's why they are already saying that in coming time, the leading cause of death all over the world is going to be pollution. So that it's that harmful.
Anumita, one thing that you could also help us understand is the policy. How has the policy for towards air pollution, how is the policy landscape over the last 20 years panned out?
Yes, and that's a very interesting trajectory, because even though we had one of the most powerful legislations on air pollution and on environment, but despite that, we never really had a concerted program to address the problem. So the whole action that has been catalyzed so far, especially in the Delhi NCR region, is when Supreme Court intervened many, many years ago in response to public interest litigation. And since the late 90s, there has been a spate of directives from the Supreme Court on various aspects of pollution control. So that has been the main catalyst to really build the momentum. But subsequently, then the government of India came up with a national clean air program, where they then understood the national dimension of the challenge. And now about 134 cities who have been identified as the most polluted, and they have been mandated to implement clean air action plans. But what is important for us to understand, that's why Delhi NCR, even though it is the most polluted and the poster boy of, globally, it is also the epicenter not only of pollution but also of action. And that is the paradox that we need to understand. If I really tell you that, whatever Delhi has done so far to control pollution, no other city has done that. So let's look at that first. So Delhi is the only city that has moved its entire public transport, its local commercial transport, out of diesel to natural gas. It has already moved to Bharat State 6 emission standards, which is much, much cleaner. It has phasing out old vehicles. There are restrictions on trucks. There are extra tax that we pay on big diesel cars and also on the diesel fuel, right? At the same time, all coal power plants in Delhi have been shut. There were 4. All of them have been shut. An entire industry, the legal industrial estates, have moved out of coal and other dirty fuels to natural gas. None of these are small measures. These actually indicate quite a fundamental change in the energy system in the city.
Absolutely.
And with that, we have actually seen a long-term downward trend in air pollution in the city, right? That's encouraging. So we've seen roughly about 46% reduction since 2012-13, if you compare some of the oldest monitoring stations in the city.
Okay.
And yet, and that's the challenge, even after doing so much, even after the improvement, the levels today of PM 2.5 that he's talked about is we still require another 60% reduction to be able to meet the clean air standard. Now imagine with such fundamental decisions taken on energy system in transport and industry, you could get about a little more than 40% reduction. Now how stringent, aggressive, and upscaled action it needs to be for another 60% reduction. That is the challenge that people have to understand today. So I'd say that while the awareness regarding the problem has grown quite a bit to the extent that people are taking to the streets, but now we really need awareness to build around the solutions. You have to take to the streets now for the solutions.
Very interesting. When you talk about standards, you are referring to the India-specified standards, right?
Yes, which was much more lax than what WHO would want you to do.
Exactly. I was coming to that India standards are lax than the WHO standards. So we specifically refer. So we are not matching the India standards at all now. Delhi.
Even, yeah, absolutely.
Forget WHO. It's still long way away. Okay, interesting. Dr. Modi, you have been sort of amplifying the whole issue through your blogs, through your write-ups. How the patients, could you give us a sense of, share some anecdotes with us about how the patients are reacting to this whole thing? They confide with you in terms of what they are facing, what they are going through, and have you seen a sort of a change in their attitude towards air pollution? What has been your experience in this?
I think there's a mix of emotions in that sense. They're frustrated also that they're not able to do anything about it. And due to that, their disease is just out of control. And each year what we see, those of my patients who don't even require OPD visits on regular basis land up in emergencies. They are getting admitted, and so they're spending days together in hospital just to get normal breathing. And that's how they are right now frustrated also. And same time, they have realized the importance of taking utmost precaution. So I do see a change in them, that now they are taking their medicines regularly. They used to be lax. They always come wearing a mask, which we have been propagating, I think, for more than 15-20 years now, that wear a mask protects you significantly. I think after COVID also, the attitude towards mask has improved. People are more acceptable to wearing a mask outside, and that's helping to control the harms of pollution as well. And some of my patients even have now made plans that they, for 2-3 months, they go out of Delhi. Obviously, it's not possible and feasible for everyone who is a working class.
Yeah.
For those who are doing businesses or who can do work from home, they can take a vacation and go. But they are trying from their end whatever they can do to protect themselves from pollution. And especially, they are more worried right now about their children, because now these children are getting exposure at a very young age where their lungs have not even developed. And the incoming times, their lungs might get damaged even before they reach proper adult age. So that's a big problem, and that has to be taken.
Are you getting patients, young patients?
See, when we talk about pollution, the effects are not restricted to long-term things. I would say there are two aspects of that. When we see sudden rise of pollution at this point of time, so it is a mixture of particulate matter. It's a mixture of some gases like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and ozone and carbon monoxide. So these are colorless gases. These are odorless. You cannot just see that. And these are all irritant gases. So when you are exposed to that, you have symptoms like sneezing, runny nose, sore throat, wheezing, asthma-like symptoms. So when these gases are exposed, so it affects all age groups. So immediate effects which we see even in children are these asthma-like symptoms. And then gradually, constant exposure causes permanent damage in lung. Then we see diseases like COPD over years, lung cancer developing over years. So there are short-term symptoms, there are long-term effects. So both have to be taken care of right now.
But the number of patients coming to you having pollution related,
so
that has gone up.
Really goes, I would say, 10 times the number I would be seeing other time of the year. So whenever this pollution is there, we see almost 10 times more patients coming to OPD specifically for this problem. And obviously, I would say that pollution for 12 months a year is bad. And that's why number of cases having respiratory issues, I would say 10 years back, nobody used to talk about respiratory issues. And there was used to be a heart doctor, there used to be a stomach doctor, but no one used to understand there was a pulmonologist also. And now people are realizing that this is also a specialty, because now people are getting breathing issues more and more.
So what has your advice to your patients changed over time?
And yes, the requirement for medicine has gone up. we always advise them to take precautions like wearing a mask. We advise them that early morning and evening times, when the weather is more cold, at that point of time the pollution is at its worst. So if you have to go out, just try to go out in the afternoon. And apart from that, we advise vaccination to many of our patients to protect them from secondary infections. So obviously things are going up, and the thing is that we are upscaling medicines day by day, but there will be a point when the medicines also will stop working, and that will be the worst time.
It will be
Yes, the body will be resistant to even these medicines. That's a thing, and at that point of time, we will also have nothing to offer to our patients. So that's a worrisome situation.
Over the last few years, I've seen a lot of medical fraternity professionals, getting more vocal about this.
Yeah.
And this is something I think heartening and enlightening also. The fact that, we have a environmental specialist, we have a medical expert, talking more or less the same thing, and the fact that both of you are highlighting something which is, we all know is, it's a life and sort of a death issue, for many, I would say. It's something which, but, tell me one thing, like, is it something also, do you also feel a bit frustrated by the fact that, this is a systemic issue, it needs a systemic solution? Band-aid solutions like having a cloud seeding or having, say, watering of the roads may or may not work. But this is a systemic, you need systemic solutions to the whole issue. Is that a sense of frustration that you get at times?
Definitely systemic solutions are needed, but as I'm already said, that government is doing their part. Their BS6 norms, taking off vehicles after 15 years, trying to control diesel vehicles. So they are doing their bit, but obviously the population is growing, number of automobile industry is growing, number of cars on the road are increasing day by day. So the measures which would have taken care of the things prior to this, but now since the automobile industry is growing, more and more cars are there, so the pollution levels are also going up. So that's where I think we are still lacking. So we have to find solutions in that term also. Obviously systemic solutions are the need, but that's a difficult thing to, even for the government to just do in snap of thing. So that's a problem right now.
Talking of systemic solutions, could you break, for the help of our audience, could you help them understand better in terms of, say, how, I was reading one of your interviews where you talked about the fact that majority of the source of the pollution is local. It comes from Delhi itself, though we talk about, the stubble burning and other issues, but I think more than 50% comes from local sources. Could you just break it down for us and help us out?
Absolutely. So right now, Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, they have this fascinating number crunching that they do. So especially during winter, you get to know by the hour where the pollution is coming from. So in that, you will see some fraction that comes from outside Delhi, right? But that's not only farm fires. That's like your surrounding NCR, other districts, because pollution does not follow political boundary. The air blows, and with that, the pollution blows. But then, if you look at only the local sources of Delhi, okay, these are the vehicles, industry, waste burning, construction, use of solid fuels, and several others. And if you take all of them together, only the local sources, then they also give you the split, that how much each one of them are contributing. Right now, if you take the local sources of Delhi, then vehicles are literally half of the problem, 50% coming from vehicles, followed by peripheral industry, waste burning, and the other biomass burning, construction activities, and the several others. So now we know therefore where the pollution is coming from. And even when we say that some pollution is coming from outside Delhi, the sources are also say outside Delhi as well.
Okay.
Right? Now this means that your action has to focus on cutting emissions at the source of the pollution. So if it's the vehicles, then even though we have taken some technology solutions for vehicular pollution, but right now Delhi is going through a mobility crisis. The explosive number of vehicles on the road, just because we do not have adequate public transport system. So the growing dependence on personal vehicles, that's huge. So unless you completely systemically change the way people travel, provide them with convenient, reliable integrated public transport services with walking, cycling infrastructure, only then you'll be able to deal with it. The other is the waste. Why should waste burn in any city if the municipalities have invested adequately in the collection, segregation, and material recovery from the waste and remediation of the legacy waste, Balsava, Gazipur, all the landfill mountains that we have? So clearly we do not have adequate infrastructure to deal with it. So the waste accumulating in the open, they burn. And then, of course, the legal industries have moved to clean fuel. But there are a large number of tiny, small-scale units in non-conforming areas where you cannot even monitor them. You don't even know what fuel they are using. And then there's an equity issue. There are still such large number of poor and the migrant population in the city who cannot afford LPG. They rely on the gas, the solid fuels, the firewood and etc. And for heating, for cooking. Now you need to have a policy for them. And then urbanization means huge construction.
Absolutely.
Right? It's actually a development agenda, and the investments that are flowing in for the development agenda will have to be better informed so that the same investment can be done responsibly to give you the cleaner benefits. And that's where we are missing the point.
As to bring here, I'd like to bring in the fact that, the National Clean Air Program, you mentioned it earlier. I was reading about it, and I believe 11,000 crores were disbursed between 2019 and 2025. 2019, when the program got started, and 67% of that 11,000 crores was allocated to road dust management.
So that's the whole challenge.
We are not, whatever you said right now is not being covered here. We're talking about road dust management.
So that's in fact, we have done that analysis of how this money has been spent under the National Clean Air Program. And what we found that even when we know that these are the different sources of pollution, but when you look at the actual spending, then 67% has gone only to cleaning up the roads, repairing roads, and sprinkling water on the roads. Okay? And the point that I had made right in the beginning, treating pollution problem as just a dust problem, as a road dust problem, ignoring the fact that your other development areas, your mobility, travel, industry, power generation, all these are major sources of toxic pollution. So not only 61% on dust, industrial pollution management got less than 1%. Transport has got just about 12%, right? So it just shows that even though science is telling us, in fact, all that we know about the science is actually from the studies that have been supported by the government. All the source apportionment studies, inventory studies, they have given us a very clear idea about what the pollution profile is like in different cities. And yet, that is not informing the spending priorities of the government adequately. And that's why we are saying that it is very important now that we begin to think about the solutions very differently. And maybe they look at it as a low-hanging fruit. Okay, maybe they are finding it tough to address the systemic and infrastructure level interventions that are needed at the industry level, transportation level for the waste management. But this cannot be delayed any further. This will have to be upscaled. And the point to be noted here is that every year when we talk about pollution, it is Delhi that hogs the limelight, without realizing that around this time of the year, when Delhi is smogged in very poor quality, severe quality, it is just not Delhi. It is the entire Indo-Gangetic plain. And the towns and cities of Indo-Gangetic plain are in the same crisis because of the very adverse our geoclimatic conditions. It's landlocked region. We do not have the advantage of sea breeze in northern India, right? So the natural ventilation in the region is very weak. So during winter, due to calm and cool conditions, when air gets trapped, along with that, the pollution gets trapped. That's why we see such rapid increase in pollution during winter. It's not that during winter, suddenly pollution sources have increased, right? Now, if that is the scenario, then that means only Delhi taking action is not going to address the problem. Delhi cannot become a green island in Indo-Gangetic Plain when the entire IGP is, kind of covered with a blanket of smog. So all the action that we are talking about today will have to be upscaled across the region, just not Delhi. Only then. And the biggest lesson on that is actually from the pandemic hard lockdown days. Remember, that was a time when we all talked about high blue sky and it's all cleaned up. Why? Because at a very big scale, you could control pollution because all activities had stopped. But even then, we did not meet the WHO standard.
And that is interesting. And despite the...
Yes.
Okay. But does it show that what you are saying is absolutely right, but does it also show the fact that, this is, though you mentioned that it's nothing, pollution doesn't have a political, boundaries, but the solutions have boundaries, So if we are talking Indo-Gangetic, there are quite a few states that fall,
Yes.
and they all have to be aligned. Is there a political will issue here? Because it's a systemic, we agree that it's a systemic solution that is the way forward. Is there a political will issue here?
That's the challenge. And clearly, if there was political will, a lot more momentum would have, and we've seen much more happening. Only thing is that under the National Clean Air Program now, there is a tacit recognition of the fact that we need to take a regional airshed approach to air quality management. So from the initial stage of the NCAP program, when they focused only in the municipal boundaries of the cities, from there, then they gave a mandate for a clean air action plan for a state level. And finally now, the Ministry of Environment and Forest have also asked for the coordinated action among 7 states of the Indo-Gangetic Plain. But this is still a very loose, voluntary kind of an idea. It hasn't really formalized into whether an interstate council or some kind of a structured institutional framework. So we have just kind of inched towards that. But this is something that we'll really have to take forward.
So what is the way forward? I'm going to say, if it is a problem which is across states, it is a problem which is, okay, agreed, there's a political, the class has to move. And because that we are seeing protest on the ground, I presume they would be much more aware of the what people want, and they would be reacting to it.
Yes.
What is the sense that you are getting, like, in terms of, you see any, when you talk to different policy experts or you talk to your peers, do you find any sort of a change in mindset here? Because if you want a systemic solution, there has to be a change in mindset somewhere.
Yes. So change in mindset is for sure needed. And though policies are being made, but implementation, I think, definitely has to be at a larger level. And all the states have to come together and then implement the policies. Just Delhi going on to the natural gas thing, rest of the diesel vehicles still plying outside. Trucks are banned in Delhi, but if you go to the borders, trucks are always there standing on every side of Delhi,
Yes.
whether it's UP, whether it's Haryana. So it has to be collective effort from all the states, and then only things are going to go ahead in a positive way.
But is there a possibility, and I'm speculating here, we saw Clean Yamuna becoming a political slogan. It became a campaign sort of thing. You see at some point of time where clean air becomes a political campaign or a political slogan, both of you?
I think in 90s there was a slogan, clean air, green air, which came up when the DTC buses from diesel, they were to be shifted. So, but that time it just went there and then it disappeared. So I think there was a slogan, so it could have become a clean air, green air, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Yes, and this is the challenge that we really have to understand. There is no point in saying that nothing is going to happen, okay? Because even in Delhi and in other cities, we also have seen a lot of traction where we have seen the emergence of good practices, right, in different sectors. It's just not in Delhi, in other cities as well. And we are seeing that in many cities today, in different sectors of pollution, waste, vehicular pollution, with industrial pollution, lot of good practices have begun to emerge where they have got the political attention, where they have got the administrative support. There is a financial strategy to do this and community demand for clean air. All of that coming together to catalyze change. Innovations have happened. But the challenge is they still remain very small, sweet, and limited in scale.
Okay.
They are not being able to gather momentum to be able to become mainstream across the state or across a region. And that's where we require a much stronger framework, not just at city and the state, but also at the national level. A lot of things will have to come together for the convergence. Because at the end of the day, it is not about how much small money you have set aside only for pollution control. Actually, what we really need to do, that all the development funds that are coming in for different sectors, for transport, for industry, for waste management, there has to be a convergence of their investment to deliver on clean air indicators. So you have to align the spending in a city or at the state level to do that. And also, the national government has a big role to play. For instance, today, in the Delhi NCR region, from the CAQM, from the Supreme Court, there are directives that the industry will have to move out of dirty fuel like coal and move to natural gas. And even natural gas infrastructure has also been laid down. But the national fuel pricing policy, which has kept natural gas outside GST, attracting cascading effect of taxes from state governments, is always more expensive than coal. Now, why will any industry move to a cleaner fuel if it is more expensive? So you also need those pricing reforms. So many things have to come together. And that's where the attention has to be now.
Interesting. In terms of, my point is that, if Delhi at some point of time could shift from a diesel, which we have seen, a diesel dominated public transport to a CNG and, of course, there was courts which sort of pushed the government to do it. You think, is that the way forward, where you need to have courts in the sense that the legal sort of requirement, you also need to have the civil society, you need to have the policymakers, that's when this whole thing is going to move? What is the sense?
See, I would say Delhi can be taken as a role model in that sense by other states. That if they can shift to cleaner fuels, why can't we? And the thing is that we are talking about public transport being shifted there, but that forms a very small part of actual transport system being utilized here. And that's why the impact is not that big. So either we improve our public transport so that more and more people are using that, or our private transport also has to shift to cleaner fuels. BS6 is one of the steps which has been taken. So in that sense, if all other states start adopting that, I would give you an example. Those cars after 15 years who cannot apply in Delhi, they are all sold outside Delhi, and they are applying by extending their licenses and everything. And so they are obviously not going to be pollution friendly, and that's how the pollution in other states is still continuing. So I think taking as a role model of shifting to cleaner fuels, other states should start adopting that thing.
You're right. So see, courts have had to intervene when the executive has not been, strong enough to push for the harder solution. See, the challenge today is that the problem has become so big that small incremental action is not going to make a difference. We really need to leapfrog now. Now, to be able to leapfrog, then you really need very aggressive decision, which the government of some time is not able to take, right? And therefore the courts step in. So even though we have some of the strongest environmental laws, but even then we have often not exercised that authority adequately to do that leapfrog. Now, what is that leapfrog we are looking for? We are looking for a massive energy transition that you all have just mentioned in the industry sector, in the transport sector, in households, right? Move out of the dirty fuel, get to the clean. And after CNG, now the next transition is towards electrification, so that you actually have zero tailpipe emissions in your city, right? So, and then the other leapfrog is about the mobility transition, so that the dependence on personal vehicles can reduce with, and you can increase the share of integrated transport, and that's the more sustainable mobility. And the third leapfrog is needed in the area of circularity, that no waste should be thrown as a waste. All waste is a recoverable as a resource. So you have to close the loop around the waste. So if it's a construction and demolition waste, that entire 99% of that waste can come back to the construction again as a resource, right? And for that, therefore, you have to create new infrastructure. The municipal solid waste that we throw away, you can extract gas out of that. Like for instance, Indore is now converts, it generates compressed natural gas from the kitchen waste, okay, and runs 400 buses, right? Now that is the new economy around the new generation solution that we require. So clean air action does not mean that it's only, okay, you're saving the earth and saving the lungs. You're actually building new enterprise, new economy, new jobs. And that's where the excitement has to be.
Interesting, and that, brings to our, I would say the final this thing where we know the solutions part. I was going through some of the CSR data, and annually corporates spend around 30 to 35,000 crores on CSR. That's the annual of the top 1,000 companies. And now when I looked up the specifically for, air pollution, there was no breakup per se, and so I was wondering, and when I went a bit further, I found there was absolutely no mention about it. My question is, how do we get private sector involvement, in this whole issue of air pollution? To me, the private sector involvement is like, you have an air purifier by some brands, you have masks, you might have some measuring equipments, devices, which is by some company. That's it. I'm yet to hear any industry stalwart talk about, is concerned about it. Of course, people do talk once in a while, but in terms of putting your money where your mouth is, in terms of how do we get more industry sort of get interested in this space in terms of air, solving the problem of air crisis?
In that sense, again, I would say that you are absolutely right that when we talk about these private big players coming into the picture, so they are talking about masks, they are talking about purifiers, but they have to first understand these are short-term solutions. We are just ensuring that the person who is wearing mask is for few hours, due to that is protecting himself from that. Air purifiers is something which is, even if you are keeping in your home, you're not going to stay there for 24 hours and you have to go out and you have to do. And there are people who are all the time vendors, policemen, who are always throughout the day on the roads, who are getting exposed to this pollution. So we have to make policies comprehensively. These masks and these are just a short-lived solution. So if we can reduce the pollution, these will never be required. So that's what I think these research and all these funding should focus on, shifting and making newer fuels, like the Indore example which Ma'am was giving. And that's how we will achieve what we want to achieve.
Very right. And I think the answer is also very simple. The simplicity of this is private sector investments will flow the moment you give very sharp, firm regulatory signals, right? Now, in the transport sector, whether the industry is going to expand its capacity to produce more electric vehicles or more diesel vehicles will actually depend on the policy signal. Right? So if the government is firm and says that my mandate is that I want zero emission sales mandate in Delhi, that every year the number of cars that you sell, a certain percentage of that will have to be electric and ramped up over a period of time. The moment you say that, investments will flow. And we've seen that with CNG. Imagine CNG bus transformation happened at a time when India was not producing even a single CNG bus. And yet when the court said, I want 10,000 CNG bus by 2001, and initially a lot of protest, no one was willing to do this. But when the court was firm, without any fiscal incentive, new investment flowed to bring in all those buses, right? That's what we require. So if in the transport sector, otherwise in the industry, just tell them that you have to move out of the fuel. Like for instance, right now in NCR, because there is a sharp directive on get rid of coal in the industry. So we are seeing the move, though slow, but they're moving towards natural gas, or they're picking up the biomass from the fields of the farmer, making fuel out of that and making that into an industrial fuel. Right? Because we want to stop the parali burning, the farm fires. Now new industries are evolving around those waste straw to produce either bio-CNG, new furnitures, or just fuel for the industry. Whole new economic enterprise has kicked in. Right? So what I would say that huge investments in the future for development, for urban development and urban infrastructure development, enormous, huge investments are going to flow, both from the public sector and from the private sector. How are you going to spend that money? So is the construction industry going to make more flyovers to bring more cars into the city? Or will you be investing in the transit to make it convenient for people to use public transport? And therefore, how the money should be spent will all depend on that regulatory target, mandate, and the clear signals to the market. I think that's what is needed. And then we certainly need the proactive move by the industry also, because in this climate-challenged world, pollution-challenged world, industries are also coming under huge scrutiny. They also have to prove their own environmental credentials. They also get rated. Their performance are rated today in terms of sustainability, which is impacting their life cycle product planning. And so there's a huge, these are all opportunities actually. So if we have the right policy framework, I think a lot better leveraging can be done for cleaner in the next few years.
So basically what you're saying is public and private investment have to sort of flow into the space.
Yes.
And of course, the regulations have to facilitate, had to be firm, had to facilitate this flow into this.
Yes. With more enablers.
Absolutely. Recently, of course, the air quality monitoring stations were on news, for the wrong reasons, I would say, but tell me one thing, is there a sort of, I just want to understand, any sort of a metrics which is from a geographical perspective or a density or population perspective, how many air quality monitoring stations do you need in a landmass or a country, or is there a?
There is, and Central Pollution Control Board has a population-based criteria.
Okay.
That per certain 1,000 population, you need one monitor, right? And then they apply that criteria. And the cities go for either 10 you need or 15 you need. And then also the siting, what kind of land use you would want to represent in that monitoring network. Actually from that perspective, Delhi actually has very high number of real-time monitors. 40. Okay.
All of them are operating, working?
Yeah, 39 are operating, right? Other cities have 10, 3, 2, 1 kind of. Okay, now some are increasing. The mega cities have a bit more, but no other city in this country has 40. Okay, so that way for Delhi is pretty well covered, even though the distribution can be still further rationalized. Because I think the Southeast Delhi or some parts where you can still kind of redistribute the monitors. So I really wouldn't argue for more monitors, because it is also not affordable always, because these monitors are hugely expensive, going up to 3 crore. But now imagine in this vast country, monitors of 2 to 3 crore, and then trying to cover the entire land mass is ridiculous. It can't. You can't push them. Even US doesn't have this kind of numbers. Okay. But they have a lot more scientific approach towards monitoring and planning.
Okay.
And now the new science is giving us even better options. So you can have this ground level monitors, okay, but then you can also use satellite data.
Exactly.
You can use small, affordable sensors network as well. So you have to create a multi-layer system with satellite, with this, and then the sensor. You can easily cover. Data, we can keep, yes, we certainly need good quality data, credible data, reliable data, because that is needed to inform policy. But even in areas where you do not have data, there is a vast expanse of India that doesn't have their own monitors. But we know enough about air pollution today to take action. So let us not also hold data as an obstacle to action. That is not needed. Dr. Sam will tell us we don't have to reinvent the health science. Okay, if the respiratory system in the US is impacted, so is in India, right? So let's get on with the action. But yes, integrity of the monitoring, transparency of the monitored data, and quality control of the data is certainly very important. And we have to push the government to install a good auditing system so that we can ensure that.
From a coming to you in terms of the private sector participation, medical devices, for example, they are sort of, and the government has a policy of indigenizing medical devices, and you see a play here, opportunity here for private sector to become more proactive, especially the tech, I would say the tech startups, for example, become more proactive in this space, in this air pollution space.
Yeah, I think they can, because we have many CSRs who are attached to our hospital also. They do provide medicines in terms of cancer medicines, high cost chemotherapies which are not affordable. So if they can invest so much of things in that, so rather than treating a cancer, if we can take steps to prevent that cancer from happening. So lung cancer, as we all know, that after smoking, now lung cancer due to pollution has become a more important aspect. So if we spend more of these things in research and tools to reduce the pollution, so that number of patients having cancer reduces, so that gives us an opportunity to prevent the disease rather than treating that. So I think that can be done easily.
So definitely. So you would suggest that, there should be much more proactive investment, private investment in this space.
So it's a simple term, prevention is better than cure. So if we can prevent that, so that's the easiest thing to do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is I think the crux of the whole air pollution crisis that we're talking about. Prevention is better than cure. Cure definitely is something I'm not sure the country can really afford the,
It's a long-term cure and not successful in everywhere. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So what would be, say, if you are to, finally put your fingers on from the policy aspect, what would be your recommendation to the policymakers be in terms of going ahead, given the current situation in Delhi, given the fact it's something which keeps recurring every year, what would be your policy prescription to the policy?
Here, I'll just make one point clear first. Like today, when we say that the Western world has cleaned up their air, okay, the US, UK, Europe, but they also had the horrendous smog, the London smog, Pennsylvania smog are legendary in history. But they have come out of it. But they had the luxury to spread their action slowly over a long period of time. So where they are today is a result of their 40 to 50 years of action. We don't have that time with us. We are in a health emergency. And we have to clean up not in next 40 years, but in next 5 years. So therefore, whatever we are doing in a developing country situation, okay, where we have all those handicaps, we still have to find the way to prioritize those actions that are going to give us the systemic and sustained results. And for that, all that we have to do is to do the development well. So when the cities are growing, do your waste management properly, link your new development with transit, with proper travel options. The industrialization, there you give them the clean energy, clean electricity, and other clean fuels, and enable the technology transformation. You do as I said, the waste management. The construction industry, therefore, has to internalize a lot of the pollution control efforts in their corporate policy itself. And then the whole equity, because in this whole air pollution today conversation is a very middle class elitist conversation, right? But the working class, the people who are the poor people who are directly exposed and have no wherewithal with them, we don't think about them. We are not even integrating their needs in the healthcare system or in the pollution control systems, right? So that will have to be addressed and give them, therefore, affordable access to clean options and clean energy. So all these are known. Only thing is, to do this, we now need not another plan to how to clean up. We now need report cards on what you have done, what is the progress, and how quickly are you going to implement to meet the stated target in a time-bound manner. And that has to be the focus of monitoring and compliance, but also develop, strengthen the institutions who are supposed to implement and build their capability, their skills to be able to design, plan, and implement. But more important, focus more on the innovative financing strategy, because you can have plans, but without resources, you cannot implement. So in that, one, innovative financing, also tax the polluting activities and polluter more so that you can cross-subsidize the clean activities and products, and also have the tax measures to give signals to the consumer that what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. A car owner cannot, ask for stopping the trucks and construction and not think about the construction workers. But the moment you ask them to pay higher parking charges for pollution, then they back off. They don't want to do that. So this kind of middle-class environmentalism also has to stop. So you bring in more equity in the solutions as well. But it is the pace, speed, and the scale of action that is going to make the difference in the future. We know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Saab, you see a role for medical fraternity in the scheme of things?
Yeah. In terms of obviously managing our patients,
Absolutely.
in terms of spreading awareness, what harms this pollution can do, and educating them what small steps they can take to reduce pollution. Because I think it's a duty of every individual also to make sure that we participate in reducing this pollution. So in that sense, obviously, medical fraternity definitely has a role.
Absolutely. It's great to have both of you here, and the fact that, we could sort of, hear your views. And I think it's also a good start that, the medical fraternity and the environmental, experts are talking the same language. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see more of you going ahead. Thank you both of you for
Thank you.
for participating and sharing your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Thank you.